Okay, everybody. So, my name is Jon Børre Ørbæk, and I'm chairing this session together with Gosia Schmidsek-Reis.
That's correct.
Yes. And we were told to be pretty close to the microphone, otherwise the people online will not hear us. So sorry for that. So welcome to this third session, really addressing the next International Polar Year. So I guess some of you have already joined the two previous sessions. So one where, when we initiated this IPY session, there was a lot of contributions, and we divided them in three. So one was more related to the observing part this morning, then, and the other one was concerning governance and research diplomacy. Mm-hmm. And this one is more related to looking at how we are actually going to plan and organize ourselves towards the IPY, but also a little bit others. But what I should say is that we know that a lot of preparations has already going on for some years, and the work done by what is now called Interim IPY Secretariat is made up of IASC, SCAR, WMO, and International Science Council. And so now today we're going to hear a little bit more about how we are planning and ideas for planning and organizing towards the IPY. And although there is still 7 years until the intensive phase of the IPY, it's actually, we feel that we are early on, but we know that preparations and projects have already been started. And it's maybe we could call it a 10-year endeavor towards polar sciences. So now Gosia will explain a little bit what kind of presentations we will have.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much, Jon Børre. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gosia. It is delighted to see you all here. So the run of this particular session is because we wanted to make sure that we'll have also time for discussions. You will hear first several presentations, and we'll actually start from the one that will maybe open a question about the IPY and some questions that we should be addressing as we are thinking about planning of the next International Polar Year. We'll then follow with two presentations of two major scientific initiatives that are based on a huge international networks and collaborations. And then we'll also focus on, in two other presentations, on the current state of play in national and international planning, so that when we move to the mini panel discussion that we put at the end of this discussion, hopefully we'll be all approaching it with even more information and insight where things are at this current point. That being said, without any further ado, we'll move to our first speaker, and it's my great pleasure to invite to the stage Daniela Sampaio, who will be presenting joint work also with Matthias Albert on might an IPY, next IPY, actually be a problematic idea. I promise you, it's going to be very interesting what we are starting from. And Daniela is Marie Curie postdoctoral fellow at the Alfred Wegener Institute. Daniela?
Okay, I hope I'm close enough to the microphone. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. So this project is actually a development of the German Research Council funded project, the World Views of Ice, Constructions of the Arctic at the Science Politics Interface. So basically, Matthias, Holger, and I, and also Svenja and Mikko, we have been analyzing the science and politics interface, and considering the IPY is one of the biggest efforts in terms of coordinated science research. So we decided to have a look at how can we, basically what I wanted to say, this is more an invitation to reflection rather than a criticism, but it's striking points that we needed to consider in case of going forward to the IPY. So basically, when we do this, like I'm not going to get too much in details, but when we have a look at the background from all the IPYs, what we observe in common is that all of them, they have the perception that we need shared effort in order to respond complex questions. So this is present since the 19th century, so the first IPY in 82 and 83, and this is also today in the 21st century. And when we observe, so what makes the next IPY unique? Then we observed two, and that I would say that the main points that we need to reflect upon, and the points that I'm going to talk more in detail today. So basically, the first one is more than coordination and cooperation. This next IPY talks about integration, basically co-production of knowledge. And not getting too much problematizing, but what we need to consider is that coordination is different from cooperation, which is different from integration, which means that this next IPY is more ambitious in terms of knowledge production. The second point is the geopolitical context that we are living, and I would say not only geopolitical, but political. We can see in our domestic societies, in our different nation states, that political positions are now much more polarized. So in what way can we think about integration when we have more convoluted political scenario? So what we thought, like, if these are the expectations of IPY in terms of integration, that's the first one that I'm going to start now, we need to consider that liaising with right holders not necessarily mean integration. So, and I think that's important to make a disclaimer, when we need to have right holders, indigenous and local populations, indigenous peoples and local populations sitting at the table and negotiating and giving their perspective. But only listening, and like this is the basic, but moving from there is in what extent can we actually use their knowledge in the science doing. And we get to the point that for 100, 150 years, science has always been discussing how to bridge different epistemologies and different ontologies. And translating the second IPY in 1932 and 1933, there was a kind of a competition between those that were doing exploratory research, so trying to understand what is happening, and those that were hypothesis-driven research, that were testing their hypotheses. And these were represented in two different institutes, which means that the way you stand in regards your scientific perspective also defines the way you do science. And when we move to the ontological difference, and that's even a challenge to bridge, if you are a positivist, you believe that the reality is out there, and you're going there and you're going to collect your data and you're going to do your analysis and publish your results. But if you are a constructivist, you believe that your instruments, that your procedures, your methods, these are learned, therefore they are constructed, they have society embedded, therefore this is not objective. It depends where is your position. And how science has been discussing, when we think about science and technology studies, that they have been trying to say, how can I bridge two different perspectives in that way? And I use here a quote from Yasanov, that science, it is a market of ideas. If you think, for instance, funding, there are very good researchers that are funded and very good projects that are not funded. And they provide good science. What makes the difference between funding and not funding is what are the priorities, and priorities are social when not political. And then we get to the more maybe thorny element, that is geopolitics. So I have been like, how can the fifth IPY include key regional actors? And here I'm not just mentioning the obvious one, that's Russian Federation, but also mentioning if things are as the way they are, and you have national scientists that cannot cooperate with certain state due to sanction? Are you going to exclude them when we're including other? So these are all the questions that we need and reflections that we need to make. And I have heard a lot in different presentations from IPY that there's no science, there's no politics in the IPY, it's only science. But what does it mean to be political? And when we think about, if you try to draw a parallel, the third IPY or the International Geophysical Year in 57, 58, we were, at the time, under the Cold War, but still the location of research stations in Antarctica that was contentious, the inclusion or invitation of scientists from which China? Mainland China, because the policy of one China came later, which some archives show that it forced the People's Republic of China to withdraw from the third IPY, but continue their research on their own. So still, when you're trying to be very technical, politics interfere. So when you say that you want to be political, it means there are certain values that are non-negotiable, and there is a position that you stand, and that's your basic. But when you are apolitical, it means that you are not looking at where the money is coming from, thinking that science is mostly funded by nation state, is public money. It doesn't matter what are the implications of the results you are producing. So I finish here with the conclusion that we are living in a post-truth world. Science does not hold the same prestige that it used to be from before. Example is the pandemic and people getting or wanting to be vaccinated or not. So in that case, the invitation is, how can we think about an IPY that reinforces the prestige and the value of science? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. That was, I think that was excellent start to discussions and posing some questions regarding the IPY. We have time, I think, for one question to stay in time. So are there any questions on the floor? If not, I might save. I do have one question, but I might save it for the panel, since you will be sitting on the panel, and maybe we can pick it up on this. So with that, Jan Borre will introduce the next speaker.
So the next talk is about a large project initiative called PCAPS. It's Dina Abdel Fattah from the Met Office in Norway that will present a talk called Polar Coupled Analysis and Prediction for Services, the PCAPS. Dreams for the polar year.
Thank you very much for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Dina Abdel Fattah, and I'm at the Norwegian Meteorological Institute. And today I'll be talking about PCAPS. It's a really exciting project that we have that is a WMO, World Meteorological Organization project that is, via the WWRP, the World Weather Research Program. So many of you in the room are very familiar probably with the Polar Prediction Project. So this is in some ways a successor to the Polar Prediction Project. And as we just heard from Daniela about the idea for scientific integration, this is really the goal for PCAPS. So on behalf of the steering group, I am the manager of the International Coordination Office. I'll provide some perspectives on the project and also set the stage for what's to come in the next 5 years. So I will keep this very high level, but essentially, what is the goal of PCAPS? So polar coupled analysis and prediction for services. A lot of words in there that really hold a lot of meaning for us in the room. But the goal is to try to improve 3 things: the actionability, the impact, and the fidelity of environmental forecasting. So that means that we really want to make sure that the way that we forecast and understand our polar regions, both the Arctic and Antarctic, can better serve the needs of humans and the environmental well-being of these areas. And this is obviously in light of those that were here today, this morning at the AMAP session. Our polar regions are rapidly changing. So that needs from our side as scientists, both natural and social scientists, to better understand the needs of the communities and to really foster a well-being across these regions. So actionability gives us an opportunity to really, improve not only just the monitoring and observations, but importantly, the impact that people can actually use this information, can take decisions with it, and improve, as I mentioned, the well-being in the polar regions around the world. But also, we want to be accurate, right? We talk often about uncertainty. What does that really mean in practice? Can people use this information? So it's not just about providing forecasts, but actually making sure that they're accurate and also, to some extent, as I'll touch on today, trusted. So there are 5 main objectives under PCAPS. These are the key terms that you will hear probably in the next coming years from the project, but the services, as I mentioned, the environmental forecasting services, we want to improve and enhance them in the years to come. And also from a sustainability perspective is that we also want to ensure that we help enable informed decision-making. So not only are we providing better information, but it's actually being used for decisions, not only for human safety, but also these risks to the polar environments themselves. But that means that we have to also have better predictions. And that point about accuracy and reliability are really, really important then to make sure that we can do this in a way that is not just, information for the sake of information, but that it can actually be done in a way that is accurate and reliable. And these last 2 points is something that we had not seen accurately or actively in the Polar Prediction Project, but we really want to also focus that we cannot do this alone. So partnerships are very important. We need to work internationally across sectors, across disciplines, across communities. Stakeholders of all sorts are involved in this project because it's not just a scientific question. It really is going down to the community level in some areas. So we need those partnerships to be front and center. But also inclusivity. The polar regions often are researched by Western and North American scientists, but they also impact people far beyond those regions as well. So we want to have that geographic focus and span, but also for the researchers involved to not just have the highest, most well-established names, but to invite to the stage early career researchers to be a part of this, future that they will also own in the years to come. So the inclusivity part is really important to us. And also I'm very happy to say that our steering group is very, very gender balanced. So we're really happy to also see that our own scientists reflect the walk that we are talking, or that we're walking the talk. So the research questions here then, and from a schematic, really then help drive what we're trying to do. We're not a research project in the traditional sense that we do the research, but we help to facilitate and mobilize people to bring together this landscape that we're actively trying to promote. So via PCAPS, we then help build this community around the world to do this work to ensure that we're coordinated, inclusive, in partnerships working together to help improve the polar environmental landscape. So PCAPS is quite fresh. We are officially launched last year. We have now a webpage that you are welcome to visit and keep appraised. Actually, every week we publish a new blog post about the work that we do. So we really encourage people to follow, because it's a lot of interesting things that are going on, everything from, as I mentioned, natural to social sciences to community work. So there's really a place for everyone in PCAPS for those that are interested to follow the work that we do. And as I mentioned, the blog post is a really dynamic way that we go beyond just the reporting, right? We all are obviously happy to report on the outcomes of our work, but we really want to dive into the process. How does this research happen? How do we actually engage with partnership with communities? How do these communities become a member of the PCAPS community? What are really the challenges that people face? And what is the honest take and opinion that people have on the challenges that we're facing amidst the climate that we're working within? So we really want to provide that fresh perspective, not only focusing on outcomes, but talking about the process. Because really through a good process, we can achieve good outcomes. So the blog is a great way to people to provide that fresh perspective without waiting for the published paper to come. And we will also be starting a webinar series. So we will be launching our first one in February. So keep appraised via the website for more information. But our two co-chairs, Dr. Jorn Christensen from the Norwegian Meteorological Institute and Dr. Daniela Litkert from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand, they're the two kind of, arms of PCAPS from the physical and social sciences respectively. So they will be showing kind of how we envision to roll out this work in 4 years now, since we already are a year in. And also to kind of help set the stage for what's to come, we have now task teams established. So PCAPS, as I mentioned, is not a research project in a traditional sense, but we're a facilitating mechanism to help get research underway. So this is led by our steering group members. And these are truly, I would say, collaborative interdisciplinary opportunities to really reflect on really critical topics and research agendas. So for now, we have already 4 to 5 established, and this is something that we will actually be publishing an open call for people who would be interested to participate in this work. As I mentioned, we want to be inclusive, not just create the same space of the same scientists working together. We want to extend that to others who are interested. So keep an eye out if you'd be interested in working in such a task team in the coming weeks. And for anyone based in the UK or interested to travel there in April, we'll also be hosting an open session in April at the British Antarctic Survey to actually have an open space and a forum for stakeholders of any sort to come and speak about their needs, objectives, wants. We really want to do this in a way that is inclusive for all. So every year we'll host an open session in different parts around the Antarctic and also Arctic communities. So this year will be then at the British Antarctic Survey, and this is an open invitation as well. More information will be available on the website, but please save the date. Great. So then finally, to wrap up then the final notes on how to participate. We have many opportunities, as I mentioned, as open sessions, but there will also be workshops on an ongoing basis throughout the project. So this is something that we will encourage everyone who is interested to join. The task teams, as I mentioned, but also if you have a research project that is along the lines of what we're trying to promote for, you can actually apply for an endorsement from WWRP and also from PCAPS. So this is an open facilitation for people to also become kind of part of our vetted community, and that we can also work with you to help amplify your voice. So feel free to use that. And also we welcome any contributions from others who want to publish or feature their work via our blog, and also to perhaps host a webinar. So please keep in touch. And here is the general email, but also via the website you can reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. So is there any short question from the audience? Gosia, you have the word. Microphone there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This wasn't staged. I just raised a hand. Dina, thank you very much. It was very interesting. My short question is actually, because one of the points when you had the bullet point about inclusivity was also about enhancing capacity. And I was just wondering if you could say some more words about it. It's kind of, how do you envision it? What are the ways you are planning to do it? But also, whose capacities do you see enhancing in this process? Thank you.
No, that's a great question, Gosha, and we really want to do this in a multifaceted way. So we have this open session and these opportunities, as I had mentioned, to just give people the opportunity to enter the scientific research space who maybe have not had that chance in the past. But also we're exploring educational opportunities for early career researchers. We'll have a poster later today about a summer school for PhD students to help talk about interdisciplinary work. How does it happen? And we have other things like that planned. So we also look at it from a research perspective, but also from that community level, that we want to then have this geographic rotation across the polar regions to really amplify voices and have people have a say. So we're looking at it from very many different perspectives, but I think leading up to the IPY, this will be a good way then to at least touch on that. It's not just a scientific and a research endeavor that we have to focus on.
Thank you, Danelia. Then I will invite Sebastian Geland, who is leading the sea ice section at the research department of Norwegian Polar Institute and has been there for many years doing sea ice research, and will talk to us about selected Arctic sea ice physics studies during the past IPY and looking ahead towards the next. Sebastian. I will bring my computer.
Thank you, Jon Børre, and thanks very much for giving me the possibility to speak here. Hi everybody. I want to tell you a bit about previously on IPY from the IPY IV and some studies since then, and what we can learn from this, especially in respect of Arctic sea ice physics. I want to acknowledge my co-authors listed here, and I want to go right away to the outline of this presentation. I will show you a few examples from IPY IV Arctic sea ice research, and after that from the post-IPY work, IPY IV work, and the legacy of that, and then also touch new opportunities, challenges, and lessons learned. To the right, you can see the planning chart for the last IPY. Those who were involved maybe remember that. That was really a process I enjoyed. There were lots of themes here. One could make suggestions for different work in the different themes, and I just enlarged the kind of the corner where sea ice work was listed. It was structured into disciplines and hemispheres. To the first example from IPY IV sea ice work is here the EU Damocles project, which was a very big EU project led by Jean-Claude Gascard from Paris. And I highlight here especially work that was done in the Arctic Ocean next to the schooner Tara, which you can see in the big picture, and also work from the smaller boat or yacht Vagabond near Svalbard during winterings, which you can see in the small picture to the bottom left. There was a lot of interesting sea ice work done on these two occasions, atmosphere ice ocean interaction studies in the central Arctic Ocean. You can see on the small picture to the left on the top a setup with optical sensors with radiometers. There were also sensors under the ice, and those recorded continuously through a whole seasonal cycle. And we learned a lot from that, how the ice properties are changing over that time. In the small picture in the center, you can see how the icebreaker Tranitsin was helping to get Tara into the starting position of this drift. And that work was resulting also then in follow-up work from the work at Svalbard Storfjorden with Vagabond. A long-term sea ice monitoring continued, which we still run at the same site, now with a couple of small huts, not a boat anymore, but it turned out to be really very relevant and interesting site. And also from the other work, of course, it helped for other projects that came later, like NICE 2015 and Mosaic. Another IPY IV activity that some of you will remember is the IAOOS Norway project, funded by the Research Council of Norway, and it involved cruises to the Fram Strait during the season when there's most sea ice there, so in spring, or transition from winter to spring, with the help of the Coast Guard vessel Svalbard, staying there quite extended periods in studying how the ice is changing there. We at the Norwegian Polar Institute have moorings there. We get all year round data, but of course this was for us very attractive to be able to extend this and also extend this interdisciplinary. There's been studies about biology and oceanography and all that could be merged. Also here there has been early career scientist development. Several of those who were early career scientists at that time are now in more senior scientist positions. Our old research vessel Lanse was also part of that work in the small picture to the upper right. Another project in the IPY IV was a circumpolar floor lead CFL system study, and that was a multidisciplinary Canadian-led IPY initiative on the Coast Guard vessel Amundsen, also covering a long period, 293 days in exactly in the Canadian Arctic, and also being multidisciplinary and also including Indigenous peoples' traditional knowledge. And there's also been international participation in that project. You can see the Amundsen in the background here, and divers doing research under the ice. So where could we go from there, from IPY IV? There has been, I mentioned it one example, there's been monitoring efforts that started in IPY IV and still running. Early career scientist development, there's still data used from IPY IV. Publications are still cited. And new projects developed. I mentioned already NICE 2015, Mosaic, but also the Nansen Legacy Icebird and the NASA Ice Bridge campaign are important campaigns that are revealing the behavior of young first-year and second-year ice, the role of snow melt ponds and ridges, and ice change-related ecosystem impact. So that was developments where one, of course, can discuss how much would that have been possible without IPY, but I'm sure IPY helped to make these activities possible. So what can we learn for the coming IPY 2032-33? What are new opportunities? What has changed since the previous IPY? There are new infrastructures available, more modern ships, new satellites, new communication possibilities, new other technical developments. AI was mentioned recently now in this session, but also the ice itself has changed over time. We have seen it in the AMAP side event. There has been a lot of changes in terms of ice extent, in terms of ice thickness, snow cover, how old the ice is on average, and also how fast the ice is moving. We have longer time series available for climate data that are important as background material to both plan and to put the observations in the coming IPY into context. And there are new ways of how we work with data, how we make them available, how we disseminate data. So one new initiative now coming up is Arctic Ocean 2050 in Norway, but there are, of course, other initiatives in other countries also. Saying all this, it's of course also important issue. It was just discussed in this previous session here in the room. The current geopolitical situation is affecting international collaboration. So that's of course a big question how that will affect the coming IPY. And there's a website I just listed here, IPY V info, where some information can be found. And with that, I say, yeah, thank you for your attention. Yep.
Is there a question from the audience to Sebastian on sea ice observations towards the next IPY? Another question from Gosia in the front here. Okay, thanks. You can take the mic here. Vito also. Okay.
Also a question somewhere here. Who had a question?
Vito first. Gosia is giving the word to Vito.
Just a comment. Consider that we have 2 poles, not only the Arctic, about sea ice. Oh.
No, of course, but I just had to limit here this talk to that aspect. Of course, the Antarctic sea ice is also highly relevant, and I'm sure it will be studied in the coming IPY too.
Another question from Gosia.
Thank you. I just have a short question. Sorry, I have questions to, I think, every panelist. Sebastian, because it's just so fascinating, but when you were speaking about what we learned about the CIs and how the research looked during the previous IPYs, I keep on thinking that, and you know it much better than I do, that I think going into the last IPY, we knew so little about the Arctic. I mean, it was the previous IPY was really back-to-back with ASEA, with Arctic Climate Impact Assessment. It was sort of opening of this huge box of actually understanding, all of a sudden realizing the huge importance of the Arctic to the globe. And this is really, and tremendous research was done during the previous IPY, and we addressed big gaps. What would be the question, or what do you see as the thing we should be trying to achieve, the knowledge gap we should be trying to address moving into this next IPY? Because we know today so much more. So what we should be focusing our efforts on, the small one.
Yeah, it was a long question. At the previous IPY, actually, I would say there was already quite a lot of very interesting knowledge available. Also about the changes. There was publications about change of ice thickness, the thinning of the Arctic sea ice, study from Rothrock et al. From '99, with measurements from the submarines, upward-looking sonars. So one had already an understanding for really the changes there, but as we now in hindsight can see that really that phase around 2007 was for the ice a completely regime shift, that we see that, but that we see only from the distance, in a way, from the temporal distance, that we see everything clearer. And what's for the next IPY, the big scientific questions, that's of course part of the work now for the different people to develop the studies and look into what the climate models also tell us, how is the situation going to be, and what are the crucial variables to look into. We see how the snow is playing a big role, for example, for the system both on sea ice and on land. So I can imagine there will be more emphasis on this than on the previous IPY. One example.
We
Penny.
take the time hold for the last question over behind to the left.
Hi, Sebastian. Thank you very much for your presentation. And so I want to have a question about sea ice observations. And I've been in other PY discussions, and we're discussing plans for campaigns. But I think some of the problems that we continue to have are standardizing some of these in situ observations and also finding a common repository that's sustainable. Is this something that you guys are also discussing about? And actually, what are the possibilities or the feasibilities of having a common repository for this type of data?
Well, there's, of course, work continuously going through this, not only in IPY intervals, but also else. You probably can yourself say more about these observational data that Matt NO is administrating in Assist and IceWatch. But when you look back to these projects, NICE 2015 and Mosaic, there has been as I find, has been a good process on how to standardize a lot of the sea ice observations. So they're done in a consistent way, and data can be directly compared across this, and also in the Nansen legacy that was followed. So I think that was a good fundament how to continue this, just from the perspective I can speak more about. And I think this international networking is very important, that the scientists are keeping close contact in how to observe the different variables, and then to be able to use the data commonly. Thank you.
So it is my special pleasure to welcome all the speakers, but maybe even more special pleasure to welcome the next one, Jon Bora Urbach, who actually since the previous IPY has worked as a special advisor on the oceans, climate, and polar research portfolio of the Research Council of Norway, and he will share with us some insights about the state of preparations now in Norway to the next IPY.
So I start my watch for myself. Okay. So thank you, Gosia. Yeah, so actually I was a research scientist at the Norwegian Polar Institute until the start of the previous polar year, and now I'm involved in planning the next. That's special. So let me see. So what I was going to, so we have prepared together, Harald Steen is a research director at the Norwegian Polar Institute, and myself at the RCN, to explain to you a bit how the initial planning of from Norway for the next polar year. So what is obvious is that the polar years are, contain a lot of history, and it's really it is very nice for every scientist to be part of it because it gets into the history books. So first of all, for example, for the first international polar year in 1882, there was the Swedes built the station Kapp Thorsen in Svalbard. Norway had a station in Bossekopp, close, in northern Norway, and Kautokeino. And for example, it was led by the Austrian-Hungarian officer Weiprecht. He took the initiative, and they established their Austrian station in Jan Mayen, which you can't see anymore, but it is, you can find remains of the previous polar years many places. And especially for those that are involved in Svalbard research, you can see, even before that, pure scientific expedition organized by France towards Spitsbergen, where a lot of Scandinavian scientists were on board. So what I was going to tell you is that actually it's very difficult for me to see the slides. So what the status in Norway is that Norwegian government has already decided that Norway should have a visible and significant contribution to the next IPY, and that they have given the task to the Research Council and the Norwegian Polar Institute to start initial planning, and the initial planning is for RCN to be responsible for coordinating and mobilizing and funding the IPY Secretariat. So sorry, I don't have my glasses, so I can't see that one. So I can stand like this if it's okay. And NPI, of course we need to set up an IPY, National IPY Scientific Committee, which will be led by the Norwegian Polar Institute. We will have dialogue with ministries, of course, with funding initiatives and things like that. And we are now in planning phase. What we will do, we will establish the Secretariat and a National Committee maybe from 2026. Not too fast, because otherwise people are getting bored, without having things to do in these secretariats and committees. So to repeat, so we will work with a mandate for that committee. We will gradually staff a secretariat that we also previously had for the previous polar year. We will write budget proposals for the ministries, and with, of course, ambitious plans for a Norwegian contribution. We will, of course, think thoroughly about how to compose, what kind of people should be in the committee, and well, also, of course, how many people should be in a secretariat. There are many relevant international conferences, of course. One is a short start here. We know the ICARP and Arctic Science Summit Week in Boulder in 2 months. There will be, of course, an IPY focus in what we every second year organize in Oslo, a Svalbard conference. The Svalbard research, international research in Svalbard is very important for Norway, of course. And there is also Norway has taken the initiative to organize the SCAR Open Science Conference in 2026. So that's said. So what I know that Gelis will show this map and explain a little bit more. I will not do that, but we have already started. We are already in the planning phase. And I know that many projects are already being set up. We heard the PCAPs, which is obviously a contribution to the next polar year. And what we will do at RCN, we will of course work international. We will work with the Arctic Science Funders Forum. We would want to make plans for Belmont Forum calls, for example. And Horizon Europe will be a very important contribution. I really hope that through the framework programs of Europe or of the European Commission, it must come IPY-related calls. Coordination is also, of course, being done other places. We will also work with our national calls, maybe bilateral and Nordic. And we know that the research infrastructures and also large projects are very important, and they need to prepare themselves, of course, for it. What I should say is that I will just refer to the research prioritization being done by in Norway and also in the EU PolarNet project funded as a coordination and support action in Europe. So what we do when we are looking at research priorities in Norway, of course, we have done a lot with an evaluation of Norwegian polar research. We have made an planning, what do you call it? Oppfølgingsplan, planning, implementation plan of the recommendations. We have it's a lot of information found in EU PolarNet in the proposed European Polar Research Integrated Polar Research Program. We have made an overview of how funding of polar research has been done in Europe. We have made priorities for research funders under EU PolarNet. There are 20 topics beautifully written out as almost as calls that we will find them in Horizon in the framework program. We have also made a Norwegian counterpart where we had a survey, bottom-up survey of research priorities in Norway. And we also have made an analysis trying to match the funding and the priorities with some recommendations. I will just skip this, I think. So previously we had a quite large contribution from Norway for the past IPY. We had a secretariat. We organized the final conference in near Oslo. We had we funded actually under what became endorsed IPY projects. We funded 28 research projects and 22 outreach and education projects. And obviously, and after this, a lot of things happened in the Norwegian landscapes. We established many centers. I wouldn't say that the Fram Center and Bjerknes and these things are a result of the IPY, but they were inspired, and there was a lot of attention on, of course, on polar research after this IPY. Then some obvious contributions. This is not a final slide, but obvious contributions for Norway would be to expect that the new large institutional initiative called Polar Ocean 2050 will be realized also with funding through RCN and ministries. Of course, Norway is also contributing to the Antarctica InSync, will be an Antarctic part and a campaign towards the IPY. We expect to have maybe 1 or 2 national IPY calls. Svalbard, as I said, is important. In Antarctica, we are upgrading the Norwegian station. We have funded a large research infrastructure project there, which need to be used. Sorry, and education and outreach needs to be good. So now I just will very fast show you what I expect that need to be better for the next time. So obviously, what we heard early this morning, integrated observing systems need to be important. And we need to go even further than what we have done before. And these observing systems need to be harmonized with essential variables, and they need to deliver something in a fair and care way. And that is, gives a lot of expectations to those existing infrastructures that are collecting data. We cannot just do basic research and to understand, I argue that we need to understand the polar system. It needs to be translated into a language that policymakers understand. And we need to give something to people, because those that are defining our future are the people in the street. They need to understand the importance of the polar regions. So the next IPY need to have outreach activities and talk with people. We need to have science policy, the research diplomacy. We heard a lot about that in the past session. Our dream could be that the next IPY contributes to a peaceful and sustainable future in the Arctic and in polar areas. And lastly, obviously we need to involve industries and private actors in order to collect data. That is actually my also obviously that what we need to do. And that was final words for me. Thanks. Thank you.
That's all right. Since we are at the time, we'll save the questions for the panel about this presentation. But I think it is very fair to say that one of the most important parts of the legacy of the previous IPY is APEX, Association of Polar Early Career Scientists. And it is my great pleasure that the next speaker will be Sarah Strand, who is the Executive Director of APEX.
Thanks, Gosha. Yes, it's my pleasure to present on behalf of APEX, the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists. Let's see if we can, I see the slides, but, oh, I think they're working in the back to get them up on the screen. But while they're doing that, I can just, start and say, so APEX grew out of the last IPY, and that's a fantastic opportunity now that we have really been functioning for all the years since then, which means we're in place to have a very active role in contributing now in the upcoming IPY. And currently, the APEX International Directorate is based here in Tromsø at the University of Tromsø, also in partnership with the Norwegian Polar Institute and the Fram Center. And it's been very, very nice to be here in Tromsø, and there's obviously so many synergies with the institutions here. And luckily, in following up on Jan Burre's presentation, I think we actually do have a pretty aligned vision, which is really nice to see. They are still working on getting the slides up, but I will try to keep giving an overview while they're working on that. But the title of the presentation, which you will see, is Towards IPY ECR Insights on Research Cooperation. And I will start by talking a little bit about what APEX is, and then the rest of the presentation is just sorted into a few overview themes on APEX's perspective on important topics with regards to research cooperation and data. I will just keep going here. I can see that they're still working from the screen I have down here. But what I was going to start with in terms of what APEX offers. So we are a support institution for early career scientists, and we really welcome everyone in our organization. And although the title APEX, Association of Polar Early Career Scientists, has the word scientist in it, we consider anyone who relates with the polar regions, Arctic and Antarctic, and considers themselves early in their career. So definitely we have people in our network that are not just researchers in the standard academic sense. And right now we have around 31 national committees across the world, and 5,600 members, actually a bit more than that. That's kind of our recent count. So.
I can tell you that they are converting a PDF.
Okay, yeah.
You can keep on talking and then scan through the first.
Yeah, well, now I think I covered the first two, which were pretty basic, which was just what APEX is, and many of you might be familiar anyway. And so, we're really looking forward to harnessing this network that really is worldwide. And when eventually we have the slides to show, you'll see the map that perhaps it's to be expected that we have a bit less countries with or coverage of countries in Africa, for example. But otherwise, we really have quite worldwide geographic distribution of where our members are. Yes, will rely a bit on, okay, I think they are there. Yes, okay, perfect, great. So as I was describing our membership, now you can actually see it on the map. As I mentioned, we're over 5,600 members and 31 national committees now. But now I can jump into the meat of the presentation, which helps a lot when I can actually see the slides. So as I mentioned, the next few slides are going to be divided into just a few themes and what the early career perspectives are on these themes. So first, starting with priorities and challenges, and also as they relate to funding, because of course, if you're going to implement priorities, that often requires that you put some money to them. So we really see the need for diverse funding mechanisms, and especially when we're talking about early career networks, then if you want to fund projects where early careers are really involved, and often, or especially if they should be defined by the early careers themselves, then we can't only limit funding going to large universities, for example. So I think it's a big priority to have more openness in who can receive funding. We need sustained support for the co-production of knowledge. I think that's something that you'll hear a lot across this conference, but it's really, really important, and support also in terms of financial support. We need funding stability. Of course, if you're, and actually speaking just very specifically from the Apex perspective, we rely on the directorate where I work to implement all of Apex's work. But this is a network, we need money to run it, so I think it's quite common that people come to us, and we're very happy to help with initiatives, but of course we have employees that need to be paid, so there's many initiatives like us as well, that where this funding stability is very important. We see the great importance of innovative events and bringing people together, and also when there's the opportunity for it, bringing people together for multiple days in different types of settings, not just conferences, training schools, field schools, sharing circles, and really focusing on relationship building, because this is how people can actually really use networks and go forward. And also helps with co-production across all sectors, and co-production with Indigenous communities and Indigenous knowledge. All of these things are best achieved if you have the foundation of very meaningful relationships. So we see the importance of building those. And then the last 2 points are just quite specific wishes from the early career community, that we always see the difficulty for early careers in having funding to travel to conferences, to conduct field work, and also just the predictability of these schemes. So it's much easier for people if they know in advance what these calls will be, what the frequency of them will be. Yeah, of course, the last point, early career positions are inherently unstable. And I think that is something we need to think a lot about going towards the next IPY, that I feel like there's growing amounts of early careers that are leaving the academic track simply because the working conditions are not that favorable when you need to move every few years for a new position. So another big theme of this session was observing systems and data. So I wanted to make a slide that was specifically about early career thoughts when it comes to these topics. And we definitely see the need for even more data training. And of course, there is already training related to data in terms of, really, I speak quite broadly, in terms of all aspects, collecting data, following FAIR and CARE. And we also really see that, Jan Bode also both mentioned FAIR and CARE in his presentation, but there's already a number of resources out there for FAIR, but less for CARE, and we really need to uplift that. The longevity of these systems is, of course, an issue, and also we see the interoperability as an issue. I'm repeating some things that, of course, others are mentioned because the needs of the early career community, of course, overlap with those of senior scientists. Lastly, we see that something that Apex has had great success with is actually using our community to build training resources. So we have made guidebooks in the Interact project, for example, where we actually used our members and kind of crowdsourced to create new training resources for the rest of the community, and that's been really successful. So we will definitely continue to do that. Now I have a slide specifically on capacity sharing and cooperation. And even though I have my vision correction, and I agree with you, Jan Bode, that it's quite difficult to read the slide, so I will look up a bit as well. But the first point I have there, broadening who and what is considered polar research. I think this is, again, a discussion that you're probably going to hear other places at this conference. But as I started the presentation, APEX, its title, Association of Polar Early Career Scientists, we really want to make sure that people don't feel limited by, oh, I need to be a scientist, and what exactly does this word mean? We just want to welcome everyone that's engaging with knowledge of the polar regions. And I think it's very important, and we'll have a much better IPY if we take a broader perspective and all of those people feel welcomed into the process. We want to see meaningful engagement, so moving beyond maybe just one work package or a project having one training school and then saying, okay, now we did the early career thing. I think it's very meaningful to have early careers involved in every aspect of the structure. We see that our members are very engaged with policymaking, and this is an area where we need to provide more resources that people feel like they have the ability to get involved in civic engagement. And I think that that's an interface that there's a lot of interest in, but we really need to develop the resources there. Then I want to point out some successes, and that we have, APEX has fellowship programs with many partner organizations, and right after you'll hear from Gerlis from IASC, and this is one of our great partners, and we see like really great success in when our members can go into all of the partner organizations we have and actually have experience in a committee, in a working group. That's also one of the main ways that then they can get engaged and continue relating to the above point about this civic engagement and actually really getting into the process. And my last point is about continuing these discussions about how do we make sure that our community is inclusive, and how do we make sure that we really reach everyone with that point, and not just the people that are interested in DEI topics, that are interested in making sure that their co-production of knowledge is as ethical as possible. We need to make sure that everyone is thinking about this, and not just those who want to. So now the end of my presentation is very specifically towards IPY. What are APEX ambitions specifically for IPY? The first point is about related to what I mentioned about making sure that there's meaningful ECR roles within the whole process. And I really see that, I mean, the structure is still developing, but I can imagine that basically every working group, every aspect will have an ECR participating, and also that they're involved really early. So people that are starting to already get engaged now will be in PI positions as we actually come to the true polar year in 2032. And then we also, related to what I mentioned, that we want to make sure that we're creating a community that values these diverse perspectives and is inclusive of everyone, and that we should really not be afraid to tackle the very difficult questions. And I think there are many now. It's a tumultuous time in the world, but at least I can say that young people, they're ready to approach this, and at least that's something that I take from my work, that is one of the best aspects, is that it is a very inspiring community. I was just also helping out with the Arctic Youth Conference that happened the last 3 days here in Tromsø. And the Arctic youth, they're really ready to take these issues head on. So I can provide some hope there that the community is ready. And I think I'm very excited for IPY with who we know will be contributing. And very quickly, I wanted to end with the fact of a bit more concrete on how are we engaging early careers in the process. So we're starting at this combined Arctic Science Summit Week and ICARP conference that will be in Colorado in March. We're having a 3-day conference within a conference for early careers, the Polar Early Career World Summit. And this is going to be one of our first steps in making sure that early careers are actually engaged in the process. They know what's happening with IPY. They feel like they can contribute their ideas. So we'll be collecting priorities from the whole community there and using those to feed into the rest of the process. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So I think we take a question for you during at the end of the meeting conference. Now I introduce Gaylis. She has been the executive secretary of IASC since 2020 or something. And I actually wrote a large bio for you, but we don't have time for it. But you have extensive experience in organizing and coordinating Arctic research. So you will talk about plans for the next IPY.
Thank you very much. And I just want to, as a add-on to Sarah, say how important it is to get the young generation involved. And I was at the closing of the last IPY, I was APEC's president at the time, being handed the flag of the IPY by ICSU and WMO at the time. And so it's a great honor to help plan the next IPY in my current role, and hopefully get all of you excited and involved within this process, because ultimately it is you who's shaping this process and what you want to see in this process and want to get out of it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of where we are with the planning for the next IPY. Why do we need an IPY already now? 25 years after the last one. A lot of you know or all of you hopefully know, the changes in the Arctic are so dramatic and so fast that we just can't wait for another large concerted effort, international effort, to look at those changes and to address them and try to find ways of working on them. And so that's why we got together and decided to have another IPY, and I agree that the slides are really low here. So, so the IPY is a long chain, essentially, of IPYs that started in 1882 with the first one. This will be the fifth IPY. It's a long chain of coordinated polar research together with Indigenous millennia of Indigenous knowledge, really provide a long track of looking at the polar regions in an intensive way. The first planning for the IPY started in 2021 already, when a few organizations got together and said, maybe we should really think about this. And I really want to credit here somebody sitting here in the front row, Lars Kullerud, for his initiative at the time at the Arctic and IASA, together with IASC, to get these discussions rolling. But what we said from the beginning when we started with this planning process is it's a polar initiative. So we really, really need to make sure that whatever we do within this planning for IPY, Arctic and Antarctic are on an equal footing from the beginning. And this is why right now the planning is a little bit coordinated by IASC and SCAR, also symbolically for having really both poles equal within the planning process. So we started with the discussions early on already. Then there was a joint statement that was issued in December 22 by IASC and SCAR, together with our partners UArctic, IASA, WMO, International Science Council, and others, confirming, yes, there is discussions happening, and we would like to take this further and really go into a concrete planning for IPY. We then published a first concept note in October 23 and updated that one. And I have copies here, and if you don't have it yet, you can have it here or download it from the IPY website, which we published in October finally. And also credit to UArctic for funding this one. So thank you for this. That has a lot of information on it, at least for the time being, about the structure, where we are with the planning process. Keep watching it. We'll be posting new information on it in terms of how you can get engaged within the planning. We also created a logo, again trying to, you can never please everyone with a logo, it's impossible, but what we wanted to make sure is that really both poles are equally represented in the logo, and this is why we came up with this one, and so hopefully this will help at least to, for initiatives in the future to make sure there's a joint branding for the IPY process. There is a timeline graph within this concept note that all of you have seen, and I don't expect you to read all of this in small letters right now. What I really want to make sure is the IPY is really an opportunity for many countries and institutions and networks to coordinate their research, their observations, the protocols, and their experiments in the polar regions over the next 10 years. We still want to have it as a concerted effort in 2032-33. However, there will be a ramp-up period, and there will be a lot of projects that are contributing during this ramp-up period. So the IPY will provide a unique and essential opportunity for strengthening international cooperation and partnerships to advance polar research and knowledge production. And we're very well aware of the current challenges in the geopolitical situation is creating for this. So it is well in our planning and in our minds the entire time. It will also allow research and knowledge holders to build on the outcomes of previous IPYs. It's only 25 years after, so it's relatively, there's a good chance of people being involved in both of them and building on that. It's a chance to build on advancements of the fourth IPY, including major shifts towards working across knowledge systems and transdisciplinary research with specific emphasis on equitable and ethical engagement with Indigenous peoples and their knowledge systems. It produces education and outreach opportunities to engage with the wider community. And it supports education, recruitment, and capacity building for the new generation of experts that are needed to study the changes that are happening within our polar regions. So we're right now within this timeline in the preparatory phase of the IPY, and this is where all of your input is needed. You really need to let us know what you want to see within this. I'm going through this a little faster because I only have 2 more minutes. The IPY planning is connected with a lot of other international initiatives that are happening, especially on the UN level. There's several relevant UN decades on the cryosphere. For example, cryospheric sciences, the UN decade on ocean sciences, and so there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen with these UN decades. There's also, as I mentioned, a lot of projects that are already in a ramp-up period to the IPY, Arctic Pulse, Antarctica and Sync, and other projects that have been already mentioned. And at least for the Arctic side, the IPY planning is very much influenced by the ICARP IV process, International Conference on Arctic Research Planning that's happening every 10 years. The recommendations out of this process will come out next year. There's a good chance for all of you to participate in the ICARP IV summit that is happening in 2 months in Boulder, and to participate and to really bring in your ideas on research priorities for the next decade that we should maybe address within the IPY. Registration deadline, or early bird registration deadline is on Friday, so please make sure if you want to come to Boulder, it's hybrid, online, and in person. So where are we now in terms of the planning structure? We have tried to keep the planning structure relatively light. So there's an executive committee that's made out of ICARP, the World Meteorological Organization, ISC. There's a planning group where organizations can get involved. We're setting up the first task groups on specific issues. There's, for example, one on country and funders' involvement. We've heard in Norway there's a lot of engagement already, and other countries are interested in getting involved. So there's one on that. There's one on defining really what's the vision and priorities for the IPY. Indigenous leadership is another task group that we're setting up. Capacity building is another task group, and so on. So there's a lot of things happening. There's not an actual paid secretariat yet, so IASC and SCAR secretariats are taking on the roles of the interim IPY secretariat. However, we're hoping to get funding over the next year with some additional positions or an IPY secretariat for moving this forward. How can you get involved? You can participate within the planning group if you represent an international organization. You can contribute to events like here, where you can just let us know what you want to see within the IPY planning, because nothing is set in stone. So you really have an opportunity to influence what you want to do within the IPY. Or you can just email us your ideas. We're also happy with that. There is an ongoing call for international organizations to join the IPY planning group, and this is open anytime. There's no end to that. So if your organization is international, so multiple countries, and you want to be part of the planning group, please sign up. Otherwise, we will have an opportunity for a wider network and newsletter that will be up on the IPY website very soon, where you can get information as well for the rest of you. And then in terms of next steps for the next year, so we're continuing the consultation phase for the IPY over the next year, setting up the various task groups. There will be more coming on more topics, working on funding for a dedicated secretariat for the IPY process, and then really defining this next phase of the ramp-up period. We get a lot of the questions on, is my project part of the IPY? But what is an IPY project? There was a big call for projects last time for the last IPY. How do we organize that this year, this time? So this is in the planning at the moment, and hopefully more information will be shared over the next year. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So thank you, Gail. It's fantastic. So what I suggest is that you will be on stage. We take 4 chairs, and I will invite 4 of the people to the stage, and we have a mini panel with a few questions at the end, right? So Gelis and also Daniela, can you join us? Also Sarah, you need to take part. And my co-author of my talk, Harald Steen, is the research director and is not very fast in speeding up today. He has been playing football or something, go skiing, skating. So, and Harald is, as I said, also involved in this initial kind of interim planning group that will plan the secretariat and the committee in the Norwegian setup for IPY. So maybe I could, I actually planned to pose the first question to Harald since he has not been on stage. But since Gelis did not really fulfill my expectations in her talk, I will pose the first question to you. So what many here are quite curious about is is this International Project Office or the International Secretariat, right? So you do a fantastic job now at the IASC and SCAR combined interim secretariat. But as in the past IPY, there was an International Project Office set up at BAS in the UK. So I guess that some countries might plan to host this secretariat. It could be decentralized, it could be one office. So are you able to tell us a little bit more secrets about your planning of this?
I can tell you that the discussions are ongoing. So there is, within the IPY Executive Committee, we've had a lot of back and forth on how this should be organized. There's a lot of things that need to be going into that planning. We can obviously do a similar model like in the last IPY where it was located in one specific country. However, currently within the charged geopolitical situation, that can be a good or a bad thing, depending on where this secretariat is located. So another model that has been thought about is potentially like a decentralized, as you've already said. However, this also needs to be sorted out. There's certain partners on board. We need to think about the process. We have still 7-8 years to go before the IPY. It's a funding issue as well. Do we try for an IPY secretariat that is then fully funded for the next 10 years? Because you can't just stop it within the IPY. You need it at least 2 years afterwards for follow-up, or 3 years afterwards for follow-up. So is it realistic that we will get funding now for 10 years secured for a secretariat, or do we have a more interim solution for the next 2-3 years with some additional positions somewhere else, and then setting up an actual dedicated secretariat? So there's a lot of models that are currently discussed within the group. We haven't decided on the full path forward. I'm hoping to get some more answers in the next 1 or 2 meetings of the executive committee and the planning group that will be meeting next in beginning of March. And so hopefully after that I will be able to answer more, but this is where we're at with the planning stages.
Okay, thank you. We will ask the same question probably in Boulder and then later. Okay, thank you. So Harald, you're research director at the Norwegian Polar Institute, and you're involved in the early kind of interim planning group for the IPY in Norway. So what do you think Norway was very active, you know, in the past IPY. We think we contributed a lot. So what do you think, the IPY, how should we organize IPYs this time to promote a continued, no, sorry, wrong question. No, small text on my phone. How should we provide the best contribution from Norway this time, and how should we organize to do that, you know, to be visible and significant contribution from Norway? Was that the right question? We agreed on?
I think so. I think that was pretty much what I was told that I would be. So that's kind of what I had prepared. But I want to pick up on what Sarah was into, and that is I mean, I'm 63 years old, and maybe I won't be around active when the next IPY goes on. And I am here starting the early planning, and that's obviously not, I'm not going to continue it. I'm not going to be the legacy. It's the youngsters that are going to be there. So I think the most important thing we do is to take on board the young coming scientists into the planning and make the IPY theirs. So they will have that in the bones of their research. From the master, from bachelor's to master's to PhD, so they will bring it on. I think that's the best way that we can create a legacy. And you touched upon what Norway will bring into the table, and that was a long list of different contributions, but I think that setting up, or first taking everybody on board, and then afterwards is also very important in big projects like that, is to look after that there is resources, postdocs, etc., to actually work on the data that we are collecting. And so that funding exists for quite some time, because it is again the postdocs and the young researchers that are actually writing the papers and doing the analysis. Old farts like me, well, we are running the administrative things. But the future is the young people and the young scientists.
Thank you, Harald. Obviously, you were the right. You asked the right. You did the right thing. You're wonderful. So, Gosia, maybe you allow me, because I think it would be nice to ask a question now to Sarah and then Daniela. Sarah, what Harald pointed at you and your organization and the young scientists, but what did he forget something? You know, what should else be focused on when involving the young next generation of polar scientists?
I mean, I think he clearly said that the young people and the early career researchers should be designing a process also for themselves, and will kind of drive the legacy forward. So in that overarching way, I don't think you forgot anything. That I very much appreciate the sentiment. But I think I mentioned quite some points in my presentation about what the early career community is thinking of, but I think something that I didn't mention there, and also I will talk briefly just of how it relates to the outreach piece as well, that I think as we move towards IPY that we should already look in changing, is I think that when people go through their bachelor, master, PhD, either in natural or social sciences, I think there are definitely some pieces that are missing, and that many of these people, although some of them will become PIs of scientific research projects in the polar year, many of them will go to other fields, and there's not really much training in Arctic governance or cooperation, or also related to indigenous peoples and rights holders. And I think that's a big failure of the education right now, that you can go through a scientific education and be fairly siloed in this academic aspect. So I think that's something we can definitely be better with going forward. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was that I definitely think the IPY will need the partnerships with organizations across all sectors, and also especially for reaching people that are even below the bachelor's level, and that we would like to see IPY like with a whole activated society. So yeah, I see there's some folks from PEI in the audience, and of course we have UArctic, so there's many ways to reach like a broad age group, not just the age group that's in university, and that's how we'll really excite the masses about the polar year.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Gosh, I was observing this arrangement here. Okay, it is a really terrific point, and also one of those that you had on your slides when you were speaking about early career scientists perhaps becoming decision makers. So that was another thing that I found very interesting. But it kind of like directs me to the question that we have to you, Daniela, because it's kind of, this is where we started, but throughout the whole day, in all the sessions, we've had this theme that, of course, when it comes to geopolitical setting, the IPY we're discussing, I mean, if it was to happen now, it would look nothing like what we had in 2007, 2008. So from your perspective, what is your reflection? Like, how could we structure, how the next IPY could be possibly organized to support, to promote continued peaceful international collaboration in the Arctic? What are your thoughts on that?
So we received the question. There were like many emails exchanged between myself, Holger, and Matthias, the other co-authors of this study. How can we end with a positive note? Because it's so critical, and then you're just like, oh, it's a problem. And then we came up with 3 prerogatives. So I'm just going to stick to what we said. First of all is knowledge diversification and methodological plurality. But I mean, for real, like not, we just need to include, we just need to open space, but actually valuing the different forms of knowledge in an honest and open way. The second one was an open discussion of the values and politics embedded in knowledge. And here I use my political scientific poetic freedom to say things explicitly. I think more than just the geopolitical context, I think we are in the zeitgeist that we have AI and social media and what we call post-truth, and that we can actually choose what we want to believe according to what we prefer, and sometimes not being happy to say, actually, I have been proved wrong. And I think that that's the point is sometimes when we see electoral results, it's the catharsis of someone who speaks the truth, and although sometimes they change their minds, but the point is about honesty. I think that's the main message. And the final one, we did not discuss much about it, it's a democratic governance, but I think as Carlos was saying, this is still another discussion about how it's going to be structured. So I think the main message is having an honest way forward.
Oh, thank you. We do have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience, and I see the face raised there. If we could get a mic, Jenny. Here, Jenny, if you could raise your hand so they can see you with the mic. Thank you. And then Vito, if we have time. Thank you. If you could introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jenny Baseman. I'm an international polar consultant. At least that's the title that the Polar Research Board in the U.S. gives me. I think, Harold, one thing you missed perhaps was that the early days of APEX, one of the things that I think benefited the young researchers the most was learning from the senior researchers and the mentorship. And I hope that's something that continues, because I know this year in particular we lost 2 really good ones, Odd Ragna and just recently Bob Carell. And those guys were instrumental in helping us create APEX. So I hope more of the mentorship type things continue. But my question, as I mentioned, I'm on the National Academy's Polar Research Board. And we're having our first, the U.S. is having their first workshop in May to discuss the polar year. But we are unclear on how national committees can get involved or how anything on a national level can happen. So if that can be kind of ironed out for us, that would be great, because it's a big question we have.
And that's if I may answer. on this one. And this is something we're actually working on right now. So we have a task group right now on country and funders involvement that's working on a strategy both for national involvement in terms of how to recommendations we can give for countries that are interested in starting up national committees or national structures, be it secretariats or committees or whatever else they would like to do. There's been various models in the past, last IPY as well on that. But also in terms of funders' involvement. And we hope to have these strategies or these documents a little ready by mid 25. So we'll be able to provide some more information. This is also looking at the past IPY, what has been done in terms of structures there, seeing what we can learn from them. We don't always need to reinvent the wheel, but we need to adjust things to what we need today. So this is both looking at structures in the last IPY that were created, seeing what we could learn out of that, and then seeing what we can create within the current structure on that. So we're, as I said, we started purposely on the international level, just because of the especially geopolitical discussion right now, or the situation right now, but now we need to get the countries involved, and this is exactly the question that came from you, that we get from several other countries as well. Norway is relatively far already on this, but I know several other countries are in the same thing, and so we're trying to see, to get guidelines and then put this into the official structure that we've created within the IPY, with a committee or with a contact point into the international planning, so that both can, there's initiatives that can start on the national level, but they can tie into the discussions within the international level planning for IPY. So I can't give you a clear answer right now because there's a task group right now working on this, but I'm hoping to have results by the spring, summer at the latest from the task group, and then we can share that with countries who are interested in setting up their own structures. This is, well, we need to think about, we need to, they can, or, I mean, some countries, as you see here within Norway, they have this, they're just recreating the same structures as in last IPY, or somewhat similar to that. They can operate, and we're not saying you have to do this or you have to do that. What we want to do is show possibilities on what type of structures countries can set up, because not all countries might know what they would like to set up. We don't want to say you have to set up a national committee, or you have to set up a national office for this, or you have to do this and this, but we want to show possible ways of how countries can do that, and then they can pick the model that they would like to do. But we need to also then have that linking committee or linking entity within the planning structure that we have for the IPY, of linking all these national efforts into the international one. And how that is being set up right now, this is the discussion that is in the works with that task group.
Perfect. Thank you very much, girlies. Staying mindful of time, we're already 2 minutes past Vito. Is it a very short question? Yeah, very short. Please keep it, all right. Please keep it short.
I believe we need to look a little bit to the final goal and look outside our community. We was talking about funding, early career scientists, but which is the achievement and the scope? We are at the 5th, and we are the pressure of the climate change. So integration, we need to leave something at the end of 2033. Whatever is the instruments, the approach, we should look to secure the results. Integration or whatever is necessary for the urgency we have, and we are saying to the society. So it's not time to just make research, more project, a lot of activity that was in the past, but we need to secure a very strong results that can be really very well seen by the society at the end of the IPY. Perfect. This is my point, and I believe any action needs to look to this final goal. Very, very strong.
This is just perfect. We are finishing on a call to action for this. And with this, it is my great pleasure to thank all our speakers, to thank all the organizers of this science team on the IPY. I think you've seen, we called it the mini panel because we could continue these discussions for a long time. But this is also very fair. It is just the start of these discussions. And we look forward to having them continue throughout this conference and beyond. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the Arctic Frontiers.